What does the bodhisattva ideal mean for me? The term bodhisattva ideal immediately brings to my mind a Buddhist text written in the 8th century by somebody called Shantideva, an Indian Buddhist monk and scholar who lived at the famous Buddhist University of Nalanda in northern India. It's a text called the Bodhicharyavatara, sometimes translated as a bodhisattva's way of life. It's a handbook, a guide. It talks about how to become a bodhisattva and how to sustain oneself as a bodhisattva. So a bodhisattva being someone dedicated to awakening, not just for oneself alone, but for the sake of all beings. One becomes a bodhisattva through the awakening of the bodhi heart. The word that's used here is bodhicitta. Bodhi meaning awakening or enlightenment, and citta meaning heart or mind. So the arising of bodhicitta is the arising of the will to, the heart for, awakening for the sake of all beings. So to become a bodhisattva depends, it seems like, very much on the arising of bodhicitta. Shantideva describes bodhicitta. He calls it an extraordinary jewel of the mind. He says things like, it relieves the world of all pain. It is the source of all its joy. It clears away all confusion, and so on. When I first read the book, I thought then, as I think now, what if he's right? What if it's really true that the arising of the will to benefit others does indeed relieve the world of all pain and is indeed the source of all its joy? It sounds like such a sublime ideal and lofty aim, so I need to understand more deeply what it actually is. Shantideva goes into some detail describing what it is. He says, bodhicitta is the wish to make all beings happy. It is the intention to benefit others. It is doing good without it being asked of one. He says things like, bodhicitta is wishing every single person the realization of boundless good qualities. It is the wish to dispel their inconceivable misery. I think it's worth spelling out, as the term bodhicitta can sound so lofty and unattainable and divorced from my daily life. But here in this text in plain English, it boils down to this: the intention to benefit all beings. To hold this intention in my heart and mind as much as I can throughout the day. So this, of course, this aspiration is not new. Hundreds of years earlier, one of the first known Buddhist texts, a text attributed to the historical Buddha, covers very similar ground. In the Karaniya Metta Sutta, the Buddha describes the practice of the development of loving kindness, of metta bhavana, a practice taught in the Buddhist tradition all over the world and one of the foundation practices in Triratna. In this text, the Buddha says, meditate like this. May all be happy and secure. May all beings become happy in their heart of hearts. And think of every living thing without exception, the weak and the strong, from the smallest to the largest, whether you can see them or not, living nearby or far away, beings living now or those yet to arise. May all beings become happy in their heart of hearts. And also, of course, we know that the practice of loving kindness is the first precept, which we recite regularly, some of us perhaps even daily. I undertake to abstain from taking life. With deeds of loving kindness I purify my body. Sangharakshita says of this precept that love is the most direct and most important manifestation of the spiritual and existential act of going for refuge. Moreover, It is a principle that finds expression in all the other precepts as well. So it is clear that the practice of metta, the wish of the arising of bodhicitta, the arising of this heartfelt intention to benefit all beings, lies at the heart of what we do and practice within the Triratna Buddhist community. However, sometimes I wonder if we tend to have a rather narrow understanding of metta, that we limit ourselves in our wish to develop loving kindness, a limitation in terms of its scope. I tend to think there are different levels of loving kindness. Firstly, there is the level of practice where we become increasingly aware how breaking the precepts affects our own mental states in a negative way. So if I have hateful or angry thoughts, it actually causes me tension and unhappiness and keeps me in the prison of a limited mind. Through meditation, I become more and more aware how much more positive I feel if I'm able to act with kindness, generosity and contentment. Then secondly, I also become aware how breaking the precepts affects the people I'm in contact with in my daily life. I see more and more clearly that if I act with aversion or with greed and selfishness, it affects my relationships and it affects how people are around me. And conversely, if I live from an open heart, act generously and with awareness of others, I notice how that has a positive effect in my interactions with others and creates more happiness all around. So as I continue to practice, it's likely I become more and more ethically sensitive how my actions affect others, and I undertake more and more to act skillfully. However, there is a further level, a third level within my sphere of actions, the effect of my actions on the many people beyond my immediate experience. So we live in a world where the ways we choose to live our lives, especially the choices we make as a consumer, has a direct impact on people living far away, out of sight, possibly on the other side of the world, possibly yet to be born. It's like the Buddha said in the Karaniya Metta Sutta. But arguably we are living in a much more interconnected world than the historical Buddha ever did. So I can choose to live a life where I forget, for example, to take a bag with me when I go out, and so have to buy a plastic carrier bag every time I go out. This bag is quite likely going to end up in an ocean thousands of miles away, in tiny fragments that end up in the digestive system of fish and seabirds, leading to their death. But there is a direct connection between my action and its consequence, the death and suffering of animals. But I do need to make use of my imagination to make this conscious, because to all intents and purposes the consequences are invisible to me. And on a typical day, this may happen many times. I may buy clothes, and depending who I give my money to, that £30–40 may directly go to fund a company who is employing children and adults at starvation rates and have to work in appalling conditions. Me giving this company my money is like saying to them, I like your product, please can you make more of it? Never mind how, just do it again. So there is a direct link between my actions and the consequences. And again, I just need to use my imagination to make this conscious, because the consequences are invisible to me. Again, on a typical day, I may choose to buy soft fruits that have been flown in from Thailand. I may choose to buy products with eggs from hens kept in battery farms in cruel conditions. I might buy chocolate or coffee from companies that don't have a fair trade standard. And my actions will help keep these conditions going. But similarly, if I refuse to engage in these actions, I will not be adding to the harmful consequences, and I am contributing to the message that consumers don't want this kind of thing. In our interconnected world, practicing ethics and metta requires of us that we engage our imagination on a greater scale, I suspect, than was necessary thousands of years ago. But if at the heart of my practice is the intention to benefit all beings, then I want to wake up more to the consequences of all my actions, most of which will be entirely invisible to me if I don't make the effort to spell it out. But the point is, just because the consequences are entirely invisible to me doesn't mean there aren't any consequences. It does mean that in the 21st century, as a 21st century bodhisattva, novice bodhisattva, I have to be more awake, more clued in. I have to engage my imagination more. We also have to support each other more in this endeavor of waking up to the consequences of our actions, because it's all so complex at times. But just because it is complex is no reason to give up. I do need to reflect more deeply. If my aim is the arising of bodhicitta, if my intention is to benefit the world and all that lives in it, then as always I need to expand my horizon of awareness and turn towards what is really going on. The Buddha taught that actions have consequences. He taught that as a fact, as a law. So if I fly, I will contribute to the burning of fossil fuels. If I buy dairy products, I am a causal factor in the slaughter of male calves. If I buy cheap tea or coffee, the chances are I am directly supporting exploitative labor conditions. These are facts, even if I have to engage my imagination to see it, and even if I have to live with the tension and discomfort of those facts. But what the bodhisattva ideal means for me is to aspire to have a heart big enough to keep turning towards the truth. It is to aspire to have a heart that is big enough to keep including those beings that are linked to me through time and space, and aim to act towards them with generosity, with kindness, with truthfulness, and with as much awareness as possible.